Wonderful. We're ready to go? All righty. Hello, everyone. Thank you. This is about our fourth try at our virtual information session. We appreciate you all and your patience. We definitely want to make sure that we get the word out and that we're able to talk to you all and engage in conversations about our wonderful Doctor of Ministry degree program. I have with me today some wonderful, wonderful people who have been. I have with me Dr. Christopher Davis. He is the associate dean of doctoral studies, and he has he's not only the associate dean, but he has also been a student at NTS. And we also have two more current doctoral students with us today. So I'll give them room to be able to introduce themselves. Dr. Davis, you can introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Reverend Kia, and then the soon to be tomorrow, Dr. Karen Todd.
Thank you, Fekecia, and thank those of you who are logging in. As Fekecia mentioned, of course, my name is Christopher Davis. I teach in the area of preaching and pastoral leadership, but for the purpose of this session, I serve as Associate Dean of Doctoral Studies, which is just a fancy way of saying that I'm responsible for all 6 tracks of the D.Min at Memphis Theological. Studying at Memphis Theological in the Doctor of Ministry program, you can do a Doctor of Ministry in Leadership. You can do a Doctor of Ministry in Preaching. You can do a Doctor of Ministry of Pastoral Therapy and Counseling, Forming and Growing Churches, Land, Food, and Faith, and we also have a Korean doctoral program. So 6 different tracks, and I personally believe that we have perhaps one of the best and most robust programs in the country, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later in the session.
Hi, everybody. I am Kia Moore. I am a student in the Doctor of Ministry program for Forming and Growing Churches in the 21st Century. I am completing the last bit of the coursework before we start dissertation. Have a big important paper due tomorrow to help facilitate that process. But I'm just really excited about what we've learned and how those experiences have really helped to shape me as a pastor and just me as someone who follows Jesus Christ.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Karen Todd, and I am a current D.Min student. Prayerfully, I will no longer be current after my 9 o'clock meeting tomorrow. But so I am in the cohort that is the track that is pastoral counseling or pastoral therapy. So we're getting our Doctor of Ministry in Faith and Health, and that track is pastoral therapy.
Thank you all so much. So one of the things about being on this Facebook Live is that you, the viewers, are going to be able to ask questions, and we wanted to be able to provide you a view from the student perspective as well as the perspective from our associate dean. So as you all as we're going through this Facebook Live, please make sure that you share this post as well as ask questions so that we can answer them live for you. So, Dr. Davis, can you share with us more about the Doctor of Ministry program?
Absolutely. I think one of the key differences that prospective students need to understand is that unlike the EDD or the PhD, this is not a research-based degree per se. The D.Min is focused on 2 things, a project, and it's also focused on context. What that essentially means is in the D.Min program, within the context of ministry, now when I say ministry, I'm not just talking about within the 4 walls of the church, because of course understanding and places and spaces of ministry are varied. But what we attempt to do in the Doctor of Ministry program in each specific track is within that area, we try to answer a question or identify an issue or a problem, and the students over the course of 3.5 years work through devising a plan or what we call a project to address that particular concern. Another major difference between the D.Min and the PhD is with the PhD program, it's quote unquote new work. Well, one of the things in the D.Min program is while some of our students offer new work, many of them choose to improve upon existing work. That is to say, they may say, well, This particular approach would work in my context if the original author had taken into consideration this, or it is not sensitive to culture, it's not sensitive to gender, it's not sensitive to socioeconomic status. So our students get an opportunity in many instances to go back and rework existing work so that it can speak to a specific rather, context and culture. That's one of the major differences between the D.Min and PhD program.
What can students expect as a format for the D.Min program?
Well, interestingly enough, we are in the midst of change. Karen and Kia both came into the program when we were doing what we call a 2-week residency. That is to say, in the course of the academic semester, you would spend 2 weeks face-to-face in the classroom at Memphis Theological Seminary. Well, we have since changed that, and now we're going to a 1-week residency. So essentially what that would look like is you will engage in what we call pre-residency work. So there'll be some advanced reading, some writing assignments and so forth. Then you will spend 5 days in sort of an intensive setting where you essentially will be in class from roughly 8:30 in the morning to 5:30 in the evening, where you will go all day for 5 straight days. And then of course, there will be some post-residency work where you sort of reflect upon the work that you've done in that week with some additional reading and perhaps some writing and so forth. Mm-hmm. And you will do that for 4 classes. The 5th class is an immersion, where we look to actually take our students out of their current context and move them in a different context. And then of course, 6 and 7 are independent study, where you're essentially implementing your project and then writing up your results. What would be called in the PhD program, many people refer to it as the dissertation. In the D.Min process, we refer to it as the project report.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us an example of an immersion trip? I'm specifically speaking of the one where you took a group of students.
Well, I didn't want to get into that because, of course, Kia is on the section.
Specifically to the one that I was not able to attend when you went over the seas. So
right. Well, see, Kia's group, the reason I want to get into this is because, of course, Kia's group was supposed to go to the UK for their immersion, but of course, with Corona, that has we were not able to pull that off. But some of our previous immersions, we have done Africa, we've done the United Kingdom, and then of course we operate within the continental U.S. We've done Atlanta and some other places. So it's really dictated by the focus of the track and what's available during that time. But we try to make the immersion experience just that, a true immersion in terms of a different setting that's uniquely different from their current ministry context.
Can I speak to the immersion, unless you're changing it, can I speak to the immersion as it relates to pastoral counseling?
Absolutely, because that is the track. Well, there are 2 tracks that are different. The pastoral counseling and land, food, and faith. I will let Karen speak to the pastoral counseling, and then I'll come back and say something about the land, food, and faith. Okay,
as a part of the pastoral counseling track, instead of doing an immersion that replaces a residency, we actually are immersed the entire time, because we are released to have counseling sessions with clients under supervision. So we are immersed the entire time. Once we finish the first residency, we were released to begin to accept clients, and we have to have a counseling supervisor, so we're not just out here running wild. And also, we are in therapy ourselves, because you have to be a therapist or to be a counselor and to be an effective one, you need your own therapist or your own counselor. So those are 2 things that we do. So we don't necessarily get the trip, but we are certainly immersed.
Wonderful. Now, how do you choose your supervisor? What's the process for that?
Well, typically, in terms of supervisors for the project, what ends up happening is by the time students get to residency 4, they should be completing what we call a preliminary project proposal. That is to say, they've already started thinking about what their project is going to look like, what particular issue they're going to address. And then based upon their preliminary project proposal, I normally try to pair them with supervisors or faculty advisors who closely align in that particular discipline. And the wonderful part about it is with D.Min is the D.Min is really focused on practitioners. So the good part about that is many of our project supervisors are men and women who are already actively engaged in that work. So you get a chance to partner with somebody who's actually doing what it is you're interested in doing. And of course, with the advent of technology and so forth, we're not just limited to Memphis. We've got advisors now that are literally around the country. Speaking of which, Karen mentioned that she's got her oral exam on tomorrow. I've been doing oral exams now for about the last week and a half. Just to show you the diversity of Memphis Theological, last Tuesday, I started my morning with an oral exam for a student in Cambodia, and I ended my day with an oral exam for a student in Ethiopia. So you literally get an opportunity to interact with students from around the world.
Wow, that is awesome. Now, particularly for the faith and health, their supervisors are a bit different. Are you able to speak to that a bit?
Well, I can, and then I'll let Karen chime in because, of course, there with the faith and health track, you have two options. Of course, as you complete the D.Min, which I think is which is interesting about this program, you can go the licensure or the non-licensure route. By that, what I mean is, if you're interested in getting a state license so that you can hang your shingle and actually bill folks insurance, one of the things about it is Karen mentioned that they're already sort of engaged in the counseling work. All of those hours count toward the state requirement for the hours. If I'm not mistaken, Karen, what is like 1,400 hours? I think
quite a bit. Yeah, whatever number represents quite a bit.
Yeah, so I think it's 1,400 hours that you have to complete, 1,400 hours with patients. And so I think, and again, Karen will have to help me with this. I think by the time you finish the D.Min program, you'll probably have about maybe about 300, Karen.
Yes, if you are consistent, yes.
Yes, you should complete about.
Sometimes there are some students who have. There are some who are able to go through where they work for EAP. There are some who are pastors that, of course, they can count the congregational sessions. But then there are those who are not actively engaged. So sometimes it's a little more difficult for them to get clients. But then some of them are not going for the actual licensure. Right. They're going just for the doctorate in pastoral counseling. So.
And one of the things I like about that, Fekecia, to be quite honest with you, of course, we do know the church is radically changing. As a matter of fact, I'm sure Kia will say something about that because that's what her particular track is focused on in terms of forming and growing churches. The truth of the matter is, as the church changes, students who are finishing up seminary now, going into ministry, will not necessarily have the luxury of ministry that I had per se. When I came out of ministry, came out of seminary, that is to say, you graduate, you get a degree, you get called to a church. If you're lucky, you get to serve there maybe 20, 25 years in some type of full-time capacity. Well, the church has radically changed. Therefore, it is now necessary for those in ministry to think creatively in terms of how they're going to be able to provide for themselves and their family and so forth, which is what has made this pastoral therapy track so attractive because it allows students who are interested to actually get the license and be able to not only do ministry, but do it in such a way where it will be able to supplement their income from that particular ministry. So that has been real attractive to any number of our students. In fact, if I wasn't so old, I would go back and do the D.Min myself and see if I could get that degree. But oh well.
Wonderful. Now, for you all that may just be chiming in, Pastor Karen Todd is a candidate for pastoral or faith and health pastoral therapy track in our D.Min program. And so I have a few questions to ask her specifically. Doctor, tomorrow, soon to be doctor. What made you choose? What made you choose MTS?
Well, actually, I have my MD, my Master of Divinity from MTS. Mm-hmm. So in looking at what I wanted to do next, I thought I wanted to stop and never do school again. But but when I saw the pastoral counseling track, that was one thing that made me reconsider continuing my education because I'm a certified professional coach. And of course, in ministry, as pastors, as clergy, we're always counseling. So having the certification as a coach, and then knowing that in my life as clergy that I would coach people and I would counsel people, that just made sense for me. That track made sense. And my second reason for staying with MTS is the community. There is just something special about the community of Memphis Theological Seminary. And I did not, you don't get that often, where you are around the people who have the same focus as you, who have the same mindset as you, but still different faith. There may be disciples of Christ, there may be Church of God in Christ, there may be people who are traditional, non-traditional. So all of these different segments coming together and still understanding the value of education, understanding the value of being kingdom-minded as we attempt to go higher in our education. So that's one of the reasons why I stayed with Memphis Theological Seminary.
What specifically is your area of focus?
Well, it switches from day to day. What I've been doing lately, I'm actually a part of the Clergy Coaching Network. So right now I am coaching clergy, which had not been my focus before. But God has opened that door. So I am currently coaching clergy, but I still do workshops and I still do consultations with different churches just from my background in ministry. So I'm still doing workshops. I'm still doing all those things. I also do, I do ministry and marketplace. So I have clients that are not churches. So I may do some emotional, I'm certified in emotional intelligence. I'm certified in Myers-Briggs. So those things translate. So I have, I've done things for City of Memphis. I've done things for FedEx. So I'm kind of across the board. So the pastoral counseling D.Min helps to ground me. It helps to solidify me. But I still have all these pieces, all these tools that I get to put in my toolbox.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Now, what about, I heard you all talk about being able to get your license in counseling. How is that when, if someone is not a resident of Tennessee, they may be a resident of Illinois or Georgia, does the program still work with people in order to get their license according to the state that they reside?
Okay, in fact, what we attempt to do, of course, naturally, we're most familiar with the requirements in the state of Tennessee because that's where we're based. But of course, Dr. Ron McDonald, who sort of gives oversight to that program, Ron is super about working with students who are interested in getting their license to help them sort of work out a plan to sort of navigate them through that process in terms of what it looks like getting their license in their various states and so forth. So we deal with those, Fekecia, on sort of a case-by-case basis. Once a student determines that they are interested in the licensure track, then of course Dr. McDonald meets with them and sort of lays out a plan for how they're going to accomplish that. And Fekecia, if I could say something real quick that I think that'll be helpful, is Karen mentioned that she did her MD of work at Memphis Theological Seminary, and of course now she's doing her D.Min. And I some students, question that whether or not they want to do both their master's and their doctorate at the same institution and so forth. And one of the things that I do want to reiterate is why our core faculty is involved in the D.Min program. One of the things that we do, we bring in some of the best adjuncts from around the country, literally, to come and work with our students. As a matter of fact, and I'll be honest with you, here's sort of my guiding principle for how I do that. I look at the textbooks that the students use. I figure out who writes those textbooks. I reach out to those persons and I bring them in so that our graduates will know that they are working with some of the best out there. So when they finish the program, they feel like they know that the level of their education is as good as any program in the country. And since I consider myself a practitioner who hangs out in the institution, I try to be very intentional about making sure that we strike a healthy balance. I attended another institution which shall remain nameless, of course, when I did my D.Min. And one of my critiques of that institution, while I enjoyed the program, it was heavy on practice and real light on theory. Then I looked at other programs that are incredibly heavy on theory, but light on practice. So what we've attempted to do is craft a program at Memphis Theological Seminary where you leave feeling like you've really been stretched and challenged in both areas. So if you're talking to someone who's heavy on theory, you're familiar in terms of with who's doing the writing and who's doing the work. But then when it's time to actually do the work, you've actually been equipped to do that as well. And that's one of the things that we're very, very intentional about at Memphis Theological, to make sure that we're looking at theory and praxis.
And can I kind of piggyback on that? Because that was really how I kind of made my decision. I got my master's at the University of Chicago, went to MTS for MDiv work, and then kind of circled back years later, vacillating between PhD work and D.Min work. And after being strong-armed by the newly minted Dr. Felicia Levon. Didn't she defend yesterday? Somebody told me.
Dr. Levon.
She's the reason I'm in this program. But after she kind of explained to me that I would still be able to be myself, that's concerned about research, but that would also help to expand praxis. It made more sense to me as a church planter to do real live work in real time that's going to impact present context now, and so I know there are a lot of people who kind of vacillate between do I want a PhD or do I want a D.Min. But if you really want to impact your current context or contexts that are actively happening now, because you may not do your own site, then the D.Min for me is the best option, because you literally take what you're working on and apply it immediately as you are writing. You're not writing about an abstract concept or an idea that maybe someone can take and apply. You're actually applying it. And to me, that has a greater impact, especially in a world where, a pandemic just flipped the entire way that we see church. And so my research literally was about digital discipleship, how churches engage people online. That's what my project is about. And so it is literally happening in real time. And so that is really valuable to me to share with people, who are deciding whether or not to do the D.Min or the PhD. For me, if you want content that's going to be applicable immediately, then this is the route to go.
Fekecia, if I could jump in, of course, I want to say something specifically about the track that Kia's in. I'm excited about that track because, of course, we pushed hard to get that particular track around forming and growing churches. And that's because, as we do know, church and our understanding of church is changing in terms of when we look at church plants, we look at parachurch. As Kia just mentioned, this pandemic has forced us into what we now call virtual church. The reality is in this particular track, we're looking at all the different dynamics of church. And one of the things I wanted to be intentional about is make sure that the track didn't just focus on church planting, which is still viable, didn't just look at in terms of virtual church or e-church, but another significant part of that track is for those individuals that are going to graduate and go to traditional churches where you've got 25 members and 15 of them are deacons, and 3 of them are trustees and so forth. One of the things that we wanted to talk about is it possible to rekindle existing churches? That you don't have to shut down, traditional churches that appear to be stagnant, and just plant something new in their place. There has to be a way to sort of rekindle those churches. And one of the things that excited me about that particular track is that they're looking at all aspects of church in terms of whether you're talking about planting a church or whether you're talking about renewing the church, because there are some people out there that God has not called to do church planting. They're like me. They're not technologically savvy enough to do e-church. So they're going to figure out, in terms of how do I serve a church that has 25 members, 15 of them are deacons, and 10 of those 15 didn't vote for me. They're going to have to figure out how to do ministry in that space, and how do you move forward from that reality? And that track is focused on that. So I'm really excited about that particular track. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, I am too. For as long as I've known Reverend Kia, which has been 11 years, we were actually in MDiv classes together. But she has a very unique perspective, as well as her doctoral focus is extremely relevant and very, very cutting edge. Kia, do you mind speaking a little bit more to what you're doing?
Yeah, so because my church plant kind of evolved out of this growing online ministry, being engaged with people online was always important for me. I fought for years with people calling me pastor. I'm like, find you a church, and these people were gravitating towards me just from having prayer calls. And so once I decided not to run from my calling, the day that Felicia told me that I needed to be in this program without knowing my business, I decided that I wanted to work on how to better help churches engage in the digital space. What I found is everything else is online. Literally, there are concerts that were happening online before COVID. Like you could stream Coachella. People were getting degrees online before COVID. The only place that wasn't extremely present online, and I'm not just talking about TD Jakes and Stephen Furtick, I mean most churches, was the church. We were not engaged online. And even when we were engaged online, I called it peephole ministry. It was almost like you were just peeping through a peephole to see the worship experience. Nobody was greeting you. No one was talking to you about during offering. If you're giving to offering, no one is communicating how your e-dollars are helping your e-experience. It's all going to the light bill at the building you never go to. And so how do we figure out how to disciple people in the digital space so that they feel a part of every experience? Like if there's a praise break and I'm sitting at home, who's engaging me in the digital space? If there's communion happening, now people are using Ritz crackers and Kool-Aid at home, but nobody was thinking to do that before COVID, even though they were having communion online, right? And so, or streaming them having communion, but not engaging the people who were behind the screen. And so my project is concerned with how do you connect the people who are watching online, and how do we shift our metrics? Because before COVID, people weren't even really trying to measure their streamers or measure the e-dollars. And so for me, it was important for us not to just count what I like to say butts in seats, but eyes on screens, because those people are giving at the same rate sometimes as the people in the building, but are they receiving the same level of shepherding? And so that's really what my project is about.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Thank you for sharing that. What would you all say are some of the factors that students should look into, or prospective students should look into before considering a D.Min program?
I think for me, as the director, I think students need to be clear on the fact that a D.Min is what they want. And let me say this, the D.Min is not a shortcut to getting the title doctor. Because there is nothing worse than someone who wants a PhD but ends up in a D.Min program. It's a horrible experience for them, and it's a horrible experience for those of us who believe in the D.Min and who intentionally chose that particular program. So the first thing is they need to be clear on the fact that that's the degree they want to obtain. And so and then of course, and I think, and we have to sort of be honest about what that degree does and does not do. Now I tell people, I'm a bit of an exception. By that, what I mean is, I was fortunate. I did the D.Min and I ended up in a tenure track appointment at Memphis Theological Seminary. That doesn't happen all the time, and it doesn't happen everywhere. But I think one of the things that's important to point out is, I felt no sense of call initially to the academy. This was not in my plan. I was clear on the fact that God had called me to serve the church. And the terminal degree for serving the church, for doing ministry, is the D.Min. This call to the academy came much, much later. But the call to the academy came at a time when the academy recognized that the students were asking for praxis. That they did not want to be just inundated with theory. They wanted to know, how do I use this when I leave? So since the seminary was trending in that direction, I sort of ended up at the right place at the right time. But I say all of it to say, be clear on the difference between the PhD, the EDD, and the D.Min. Because you need to be absolutely certain that this degree fits into your sense of long-term call. So.
Or you can just go back and get the other one later, like you told me to do before I even started my dissertation.
Right.
So I'll be in school the rest of my life.
Right. It's okay. I'm doing it now.
And just to speak to when you said it's not two things, you said it's not a shortcut to getting to the title of doctor. With my me coming to the end of my journey, this has definitely not been a shortcut. It is as research heavy as you want it to be, as you need it to be. It is as practical as you make it. So the experience, it's a lot, and you hear it a lot, but it's a lot about what you bring to the table. So I am getting out of this D.Min experience what I am putting into this D.Min experience. So when I walked into like I said, I'm a certified professional coach before D.Min, but I wanted more theory for the counseling piece. So when I first walked in, my entire cohort, they were chaplains already. They were doing all this other stuff. And I'm sitting there like, oh, okay. So this is the imposter syndrome at work. But what I was able to do is not only learn what Dr. McDonald was giving us, what our other facilitators that Dr. Davis was bringing in, what they were teaching us and giving us, I also learned from my cohort. So I learned from my classmates. So those who had already been counseling, those who are already chaplains, those who are already doing the things that I was either aspiring to do or realizing through their conversation that I had no need of and did not want to do. But I also got to learn that, you know what I mean, in the classroom. Also, there's someone online, his name is Chris Oliver, and he asked about the licensure leading to the license of marriage and family therapy and also being a licensed professional counselor. Dr. Davis or Dr. McDonald may be able to speak better to this, but I didn't want to I didn't want to not do it while because I wrote it down. I didn't want him to think that we were ignoring him. But the state licensure does not necessarily lead you down that path. You may be able to get some credits, but you can't walk from one to the other. Am I saying that right, Dr. Davis?
Absolutely. In fact, with the state licensure in the state of Tennessee, because that's the only one I can speak to, you can get your state license to be a licensed pastoral therapist.
Right.
Now, I would assume, and of course, that once you've completed that, if you wanted to specialize in family counseling or something along those lines, I'm sure you probably can. I don't know if the license are quote unquote specific for that particular area. That's a bit above my pay grade. That would be a Dr. McDonald question. But for the person who asked that question, if you would simply email me at cdavis@memphisseminary.edu, that's cdavis@memphisseminary.edu, I would gladly forward that on to Dr. McDonald and see can I get you a more specific answer.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that. Let's see. So let's speak about land, food, and faith. That seems to be a very prominent degree program or track that people are really excited about. And so can you share a bit about land, food, and faith and how that even came about?
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of our newest tracks. And I will admit, when it was initially proposed, I had no idea there were that many people out there who were interested in land, food, and faith. And I'll be honest with you, even when we adopted it, here's what I sort of envisioned. I envisioned some people from Nebraska who lived beside cornfields, and they weren't interested in doing traditional church. They were going to just meet in the cornfields and praise God. No, I'm just kidding. But the truth of the matter is, I have been shocked by the number of persons who serve in urban settings who have resonated with this particular track. Because one of the things that we look at is we're looking at in terms of food deserts in urban areas where people are not able to get fresh food. There are no grocery stores available. In terms of, then we look at stewardship of land and what does it mean to be good stewards of all of God's creation in terms of the earth. It has actually proven to be quite the track, particularly for those who are interested in ecology, agriculture, food deserts, and so forth. That track is certainly for them. So,
And what is the start date for that? We have someone that asked the question about the start date for Land, Food, and Faith.
Well, all of the tracks, we typically only start new tracks or new cohorts rather in the month of June. Typically our target goal is to get out the syllabus. Once students have registered and been admitted to a particular cohort, we try to get them the syllabus in early May. Within the first week of May, the semester actually begins June the 1st. Now, if you are in the Land, Food, and Faith, normally once you get to the immersion class, the residency. The residency is normally in early June. And that's because with Land, Food, and Faith, the residency normally takes place in terms of outdoors. They visit farms and so forth and so on. So of course, with Memphis summers being what they are, we can't push that off into July. The other residencies normally take place in July because it's indoors. We know we can't grow that program if we have students outside in the middle of July. So we normally try to have that particular residency in early June while people are still farming, they're still raising crops, and so forth. So,
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Also, can you speak to what you're looking for in a prospect student that would like to enter into a program, D.Min track? What you're looking for as far as admissions is concerned?
Typically, we're looking for a student who has an MDiv or the equivalency. Now, let me explain that. Of course, I recognize that there are students who do master's degrees in other areas, master's in religious studies and things of that nature. Typically, when a student comes in with a master's degree other than the MDiv, we take a look at their transcript and decide what leveling courses need to be taken. And by that, what I mean is, were there some things that are going to be foundational to you in the MDiv that you may not have picked up in the other master's program? And typically, I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for whether or not you've had coursework that teaches you biblical exegesis, i.e., so have you had intro to the New Testament, intro to the Old Testament? Because biblical exegesis is going to be a key part of chapter number 2 in your project report. And then I'm also looking to see, have you sort of been exposed to theology, church history, because of course that's going to be vital in terms of being able to make sure your work is grounded in a particular biblical narrative, and so you can be able to articulate what theological lens that you're looking through in your work. So normally when we look at the leveling work, it's to make sure that students have that type of foundational work already in place so they can move from there. So depending upon what the leveling work looks like, in many instances, we're able to allow students to dually enroll. That is to say, they can begin the doctorate ministry program while they are completing those leveling courses.
Mm-hmm. And that's me, if anybody wants to see an example. I have a master's in social sciences and human development from the University of Chicago. I started at MTS before I got super sick and had to leave school. After that, there was 10 years of ministry between that. I worked at a bunch of, mega churches, did some consulting. And so when Felicia gave me the application, I was like, I can't do this. I'm not done with my MDiv. She was like, oh, yeah, you will do some leveling courses. Didn't know there would be 3 classes. But so I'm taking classes concurrently when the residency is over. I'll take a master's class. Residency starts again, I take a master's class. And thanks be to God, I've been able to juggle it all and do well, although it's not easy. So in terms of making that decision, you want to make sure that you have, good work ethic and a good support system if you're going to do both, because you literally have to stay focused and stay on top of when the classes are scheduled. It's not impossible. It's not even hard necessarily, but if you have a whole lot going on, you just want to make sure that you have space in your life to do both. But it is possible, and I'm grateful that they gave me the opportunity to do it, because I thought I was going to have to start all the way from the bottom, but I was able to do both, and I'll graduate on time, and I'm doing well in my doctoral classes and my master's classes. So you can do it. But if you want to see an example, it's me. Like the class was closed when they put me in it. So I'm your example if you want to see somebody who was able to do it.
Now, one of the things I want to chime in and say right there, for those who are listening, notice what Kia said. She said, I spent some time at MTS and the MDF program. She had some health challenges, spent 10 years in ministry, then came back. Well, one of the wonderful things about Memphis Theological Seminary, specifically the D.Min program, is we don't hold those 10 years that you were not in the classroom against you. As a matter of fact, we welcome that. We take into consideration when we make admissions decisions, when we look at leveling courses, we look at the practical work you've done in ministry as it relates to the particular track that you're in. So Kia mentioned in terms of she's in forming and growing churches. She mentioned that she had worked at some mega churches and so forth. So she brought to the table a wealth of experience in that particular discipline. So it just made good sense for us to take that into consideration when we looked at her particular track. So I say to students, before you look at the requirements and say, oh, I don't need it. No, send us your transcript. Share with us your story. Let us take a look at what you're working with and see can't we make it happen for you. We make the magic happen.
Yeah. And I think that's why their essay is so important. And so what you put in your essay, how you convey the work that you've been doing, what you would like to do with your doctoral degree, gives us a full picture of the student, not just their academic background, but also what they've been doing with the work of ministry.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So I appreciate that. Can you speak to finances? How much does it cost in order to get a doctoral degree?
Now, for those of you that are watching this, I'm assuming that Fekecia is trying to pump me or pull my leg, that she knows she's the director of financial aid.
I'm like, you giving away some more money?
Right. Whenever I have a question about the money in terms of the program, I call Fekecia. So why she's asking me to speak to that, I'm not sure. So, Fekecia,
it sounds
you
like
speak to the call?
It comes better. It comes better from your mouth, sir.
Okay.
And so, the D.Min degree is running at $560 per credit hour. We are a very affordable program that for each semester you'll take about 5 credit hours, and then in your last semester you'll take 6. And so it's a 36-hour degree. And so for your first 6 semesters, it'll run you $2,900 each semester. Now that's super affordable. That's the $2,800 for the tuition, and the activity fee is $100 to come out to $2,900. And so we currently don't have scholarships for the doctoral degree, but most of our students are either self-pay or they use financial aid. Another thing that I want you all to pay attention to is the fact that we have external scholarships that are listed on the website that are geared towards doctoral programs. So if you can take a look at that on our website, it's a list. Some of them are by denomination, and some are by general or the focus of your degree program. But please take a look at that. It's a very affordable Doctor of Ministry degree.
And let me say, now, one of the things that Fekecia did not mention that's not included in that $2,900, I mentioned earlier that when you get to your 5th residency, the only exception, of course, is the pastoral therapy, is that you do have to take an immersion trip. And so that's it. And depending upon where we're going, it could be as little as $1,500. It could be as much as $3,000. It just sort of depends on where the class is going. Naturally, you don't go to London and stay a week for $1,500. But we've not had an immersion that costs more than $3,000. We're able to sort of plan in advance, leverage it in terms of the size of the group, so we do all that we can to make it affordable. But you hear more about that. We remind you as you go that the immersion is forthcoming. Now, in the case, as Karen mentioned with them, they are a part of their immersion is not only see clients, but to also see a therapist themselves. And so they cover those costs as they move forward in their various residencies. As far as paying for the D.Min, and everyone's situation is different, but I do know we get a number of pastors who come into the D.Min program and so forth. And I normally encourage pastors. I normally say to them, listen, 2 things. Number one, you'll say, as you're preaching those revivals and so forth, listen, you don't need another tailor-made suit, and you don't need another pair of gaiters. You know what I'm saying? You can use that road money to help pay for the D.Min. And secondly, the truth of the matter is, have some conversation with the church that you're serving. I'm not saying that they'll be able to cover it all, but even if they can help with the books or something, or or make a contribution toward it. At least have that conversation with your congregation. You might be surprised. I was fortunate when I did the D.Min program. I didn't have to borrow any money between outside speaking engagements and the kindness of the congregation, and going to McDonald's opposed to Chris. I was able to get it done. And there's no knock against those who choose, to take advantage of student loans and so forth. All I'm saying is there are any number of ways to pay for it if you want to do it. Now, everybody doesn't have Karen Todd's calendar. I mean, Karen is on Facebook going somewhere every week. So, do what you can.
That was pre-pandemic. Karen is at home, safe.
Well, listen, I tell you what, if I get another email saying, Doc, I know we had you on the calendar, but we ain't gonna be able to do it. I'm gonna need a therapist. Look, I emailed him back and said, look, I got 5 kids, 3 in college. Listen, can we do it virtually?
You consider digital discipleship.
Tell them to call me. Exactly. Tell them to call me. I can help them set it up.
Here's a question from online. At what point in the process would you all need to see transcripts for review?
Well, normally what we do in terms of admission, if there is some concern, if we're talking about a student who does not have an MDiv, so we're looking at in terms of what you're going to be looking at leveling. I don't encourage students to go out and get the official transcript initially. What I normally encourage students to do is just get a working copy of your transcript. Typically, you can go online and print it off yourself, so I can at least look and see what you have and give you some idea. And that way, if you decide to pursue it, then you can go ahead and order an official transcript and so forth. But just as a means of making some type of determination around leveling courses, I can work with an unofficial transcript.
Yeah. And lastly, I do want you to speak to these 2 tracks. Number one, because leadership and ministry, we're going to start a new cohort for that in June. I want you to speak to that, but I also want you to speak to the track that Kia is in for church growth in the 21st century.
Okay.
Track as well.
The leadership and ministry track is probably the oldest track that we have at Memphis Theological. In fact, that was the initial track when the Doctor of Ministry program started. But of course, we have since even refined that track because while we called it leadership and ministry, it was sort of a general track where you looked at worship, you looked at liturgy, you looked at preaching, you looked at pastoral care. Mm-hmm. The truth of the matter is, it was kind of it was sort of a continuation of your MDiv program. Well, now when we say leadership and ministry, that's exactly what we're looking at. We're looking specifically at leadership, and not just church leadership. We're looking at it in terms of even in, quote unquote, the non-church world. We're looking at leadership in traditional churches, in para-churches, in non-profit organizations, just sort of across the board. We look at leadership in urban areas. We look at organic leadership. We look at leadership development in terms of laity. We take a microscopic look at leadership in terms of how can we better equip you to lead. And I like to say the principles that you learn in that track, they move beyond just the local church. You'll be able to utilize that in terms of even in your secular profession, if leadership is something that you're interested in. As it pertains to the track that Kia is in terms of forming and growing churches in the 21st century, in fact, they just finished up a course that I really wanted to sit in on myself. My schedule just didn't allow. It was called Vital Strategies for Churches, in terms of where you sort of look through. And I think why I was so interested in that particular class, it had more to do with the instructor than anything, because in that particular course, we were fortunate to get Dr. Christy Moore to teach that particular course. Just to give you some idea of her background, she was initially trained as a chemical engineer. Then from there, she did an MBA. After that, she got a D.Min, MDiv, and then went on to do the D.Min. So one of the things that was so interesting about that is she was able to sort of not just talk about in terms of strategies for growing churches, but also talk about how to use the data in terms of assessing what's going to be some of the best practices for church. Because I'm sure Kia would say something about that given her own sort of background prior to coming to seminary. So I say that to say in terms of we're not just talking about 15 steps for growing your Sunday school. We're talking about in terms of how do you take advantage of the data that's out there, even beyond. And listen, I'm getting ready to say this, and I know about 15 people are getting ready to have a stroke, but I'm going to say it. There is some data and some information out there beyond the Barner Group that we want to sort of expose you to help you understand what it means to grow churches and to establish strong, vital churches. Now I'll be quiet so Kia can kind of chime in there since she's in that particular track.
I was also going to say that too, because that's literally why I want to get my degree. I want the Black Barner Group. I've been doing consulting for about maybe 8 out of the, well, how many years have it been? 12 years in ministry. So for like the last 8 years consulting. And what I found is, although Barner is a great research, there aren't any people who look like me doing the research. And so you have to go through so many steps to nuance the research to make it fit into a predominantly Black church context. And so I was like, Black churches need strategy. They need people who think metrics, right? And how to measure things. And so I thought it was really dope that, we got Dr. Moore. That's also prophetic because, we have the same name. But she was just, she thinks like me. And so it was really refreshing to be in class with someone who was thinking numbers and thinking how things fit together systematically. She just had a really systematic approach to teaching. But honestly, I can say that all of the professors that Dr. Davis has allowed us to have just been so amazing. Like we started with Dr. Pace, which I love Dr. Pace, but I do not recommend starting your doctoral program with someone as fierce as she is, because that was the most difficult course of my life. I did get an A+, but it was difficult because she has a PhD in church history. And so she is just, everything was so specific. And we were in class like, our heads were just blown off, spinning the whole time. Like she had so much knowledge. And then we moved into Dr. Ross Nichols and Dr. Qualls and Barry Anderson, who helped us unpack church culture and what our own context was and what we are to the body of Christ. And we moved into Noel Hutchinson and we worked on missions, and he even got technical and we made a video in class. And so all of the classes have been really helpful. But for me, I think Dr. Moore was probably the most impactful because for my own context, she thinks like me. So to see that someone can come from a research-based approach, which is what I was prior to accepting my calling to preach, and then use that different kind of skill set in theology was just really refreshing for me to see. So I think the D.Min also gives you the opportunity to learn from so many different voices as you shape your project, that you just come out with this really robust this robust framework for creating things and developing practices in the 21st century church.
If I could say this, Fekecia, because one of the tracks that we've not talked about is the D.Min and Preaching, which of course is my baby. That was the first track that I introduced after taking over as director of the D.Min program, just to sort of give you an idea. When I talk about in terms of the caliber of faculty that we bring in, the first class for that track was Biblical Exegesis for Preaching. We brought in Dr. Oprah Hendricks. Now, if you don't know the name, you've never watched anything on CNN about the Bible or religion or something and not seen Oprah Hendricks. You know what I'm saying? He's the light-skinned brother that's real cool from New York that's always commentating. He came in from New York, spent a couple of weeks with a student like Martha Simmons, who co-wrote the Northern Anthology on Preaching. She came in. Dr. Alice McKenzie from Perkins Seminary at SMU. She came in. We took our students to on our immersion trip. We went to Oxford and studied with Dr. Joel Gregory. So I say all of that to say we are. Dr. Kenyatta Gilbert from Howard Divinity School came and spent 2 weeks with our students. We are intentional about exposing our students to some of the best voices out there. Now let me put this pitch in before time runs out. Not this summer, but next summer, summer 2021, June 1st, we're getting ready to launch another preaching cohort, but not just any cohort. We're getting ready to launch a cohort in womanist preaching. We're getting ready to launch a cohort in womanist preaching.
I'm not coming back, but I'm excited.
And probably one of the hottest women preachers in this country right now is Memphis' own Gina Marcia Stewart.
Yes.
Gina has already agreed to work with me to not only help shape this cohort, but also to lead this particular cohort in terms of, and so we're going to bring in some of the best voices out there. look, Renita Weems is coming.
I mean, can we sit in the back? Like, if we already paid our tuition, can we just sit in the back?
Right.
Like, can you zoom us? Can you zoom us in?
Right. This cohort. So listen, let me say this to the fellas. Just because it's being called woman is preaching, don't you cheat yourself. If you have a love for preaching, a passion for preaching, you need to get some information on this new cohort that's starting in the summer of 2021 on Woman is Preaching. It is going to be nothing like it in the country. Trust me. You want to be a part of it.
Awesome. So share with us about the deadline for D.Min applications for the fall 2020 term.
Well, in fact, because of the corona pandemic, we sort of pushed the time back some. I think, I don't have my calendar in front of me, if I'm not mistaken, we've pushed it back to May the 15th. Is that right, Fekecia?
Yes.
So you have until May the 15th to get in a complete application package in order to be a part of the cohort that's set to begin June the 1st. In fact, we're optimistic that we're going to launch 3 new cohorts this upcoming summer, one in land, food, and faith, one in pastoral therapy, and one in leadership and ministry. So if any of those areas resonate with you, you still have time to apply to be a part of this new cohort. That's May the 15th. It's not a difficult application process. In fact, I'm sure Fekecia will say something else about that before we log off. But listen, get that application in and be a part of the program. If you've been thinking about doing the D.Min, listen, the time is now. If you know you want to do the D.Min and you're not sure where, hear me as the voice of God. Memphis Theological is the place for you. Now lift your hands and receive it.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you all so very much. I'm seeing the comments on here. It doesn't look like we have any more questions, but if people do have questions, please email us at admissions, that's with the S, at memphisseminary.edu. I'll also put that in that email address in the comments. Please make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We're Memphis Theological Seminary on Facebook, but on Instagram, we are Memphis Seminary. Make sure that you connect to us. We have a lot of things going on. One of the things that tomorrow officially, but we're going to say it today, Dr. Karen Todd shared was the fact that community was also a deciding factor. And I can tell you, I moved here from the Dallas, Texas, and I have not left. I have found a great community, great family, and I am just, they're stuck with me forever. And so I can definitely attest to the familial spirit at MTS. You definitely have to come. You definitely have to get plugged in and get connected. Also want to let you all know that as the Doctor of Ministry application season has been extended until May 15th, also the waiving of the application fee will also be extended. So up until May 15th, you'll be able to put in your application with all the documentation needed, and your application fee will be waived for doctoral applications only. That process is super simple. If you go online, we have an online app. You can actually download the mobile app as well and do it on your phone. It's MTS Connect. You can go to Play Store or I think it's, what's the Apple Store? Is it Apple Store?
Apple.
I'm new to Apple. So you can go on there and download it. You can put in your information. And one of the things about the recommendation letters that we've made super simple is that when you put their email addresses in the recommendation portion, it'll automatically email them the recommendation form. Once they complete it, it'll get sent back to the admissions department. So that way you don't even have to worry about that. And so if you have any questions, I am Fekecia Gunn, the Director of Enrollment Services at Memphis Theological Seminary. Myself and my team will be happy to walk you through that process to answer any questions that you may have. 334-5887. I am Fekecia. There is a Felicia floating around here. I am not Felicia. I'm Fekecia with the K. So please connect to us. Ask us questions. If you still have questions afterwards, email us. We would love to be a part of your journey in the call that God is giving you. So does anybody have any last words?
I'll be looking for your application.
Awesome. And it takes about it doesn't take a long time for us to review those applications. We could probably get you approved within or get you reviewed in 7 days or so. So yeah. So it looks like the feed is ended. So thank you all so much for staying with me for like 2 hours. Really appreciate you all. Rev,
So you want me to finish it?
lifesaver.
So do you want me to finish the stream?
Actually, I'm done.
Okay.
We can go.
All right.
Post.
Bye. All right.
And you can.